Born and raised in Egypt with 4 siblings, 3 brothers and 1 sister, Georgette Tadros was an extremely academic person. She had a customary French education and was top of her class.
Through that experience of going to a French school, she gained a huge affinity towards speaking French and wanting to speak it fluently and perfectly. And that led her eventually to live in Paris for 10 years when she pursued her PhD.
Georgette was on the beach one day when she caught the eye of a man named Adli Iskandar, who thought she was extremely beautiful and asked around to find out who she was. As was tradition in Egypt, he approached Georgette's father to ask for her hand in marriage, despite having never even spoken to her before. Her father agreed, and they entered the engagement period, where the engaged couple gets to know each other. Despite being extremely against the marriage at first, Georgette eventually fell for him and changed her name to Georgette Iskandar after they were married. Close to her marriage, Georgette received a scholarship to get her PhD in Paris at an elite university, and she studied the short stories of a French writer for her thesis. She lived in Paris for 10 years, and during that time, her husband became a doctor. Georgette and Adli went back and forth between Paris and London, where Adli worked, before eventually deciding to move to the US in 1969. There were several reasons why they decided to move, one being the tense religious climate back home in Egypt. Egypt at the time, in the late 1960s, was about half Islam and half Christian, and due to the growing conflicts, they felt that they'd be better off in the US. They were also led there by Adli's career after he received a job offer to become a doctor in Boston. However, he had to redo his residency, as his Egyptian and English residencies weren't valid in the US. Georgette and Adli were able to get to the US very easily, since both were highly educated and contributed to the workforce. They went through the proper channels to get green cards, and it didn't end up being a complicated process to gain citizenship to the US. However, they were luckier than others. Thousands of Egyptians immigrated to the US between 1967 and 1977, after Egypt's defeat in the Six-Day War, during which it fought with Israel over Israeli shipping rights, and Egypt wrecked its own economy in the process. The US made reforms to prejudicial immigration laws in 1965, allowing more Egyptians to immigrate, but later decreased that number in 1980. Newer immigrants were sometimes barred from communities made up of older immigrants, and language barriers between Americans and Egyptians didn't help the Egyptians' advancements. However, Middle Eastern immigrants were extremely well educated, and it even caused a brain drain in the Middle East where they came from, when a huge number of educated people left there for the States. Georgette worked as a trilingual translator for immigration courts, as she spoke Arabic, French, and English, and as a docent at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Later, she was a very successful realtor for Caldwell Realty. Georgette and Adli were among the first in their families to move to the US, but both families slowly came over, and Georgette's brother started a date ranch in Palm Springs that helped to keep the family together. Georgette was also very good at finding Egyptian and French communities in Boston, which she became a part of.
Definitely a combination, culturally, Adli and Georgette spoke Arabic to each other all the time in the house, so as a result, we understand Arabic, and also just in terms of, the cuisine, and also to have, all these Egyptian friends around us all the time for holidays and gatherings. We very much experience the Egyptian culture on a pretty regular basis.
Georgette passed away in 2021 with 2 children and 6 grandchildren, and she was surrounded by her family until the very end. She was buried in Boston next to her husband, and she will live on for generations to come.